What happens when a beloved country music superstar meets his match in television's most controversial host? You won't believe what unfolds when Blake Shelton sits down for what was supposed to be a simple promotional appearance, only to find himself trapped in a verbal minefield that would end with him storming off set in front of millions of viewers. This wasn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This was a calculated ambush that revealed the true nature of daytime television's dark side. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when two powerhouse personalities collide in the most explosive way possible. Last night's episode of Jenna Bush's talk show started like any other weekday afternoon broadcast. The studio audience was buzzing with excitement, knowing they were about to witness country music royalty in the form of Blake Shelton, fresh off his latest album release and riding high on renewed success after his recent career renaissance. The lighting was perfect, the cameras were rolling, and everything seemed set for what producers had promised would be an engaging conversation about music, life, and Blake's journey back to his roots. Jenna Bush emerged from backstage wearing her signature power suit, the practiced smile plastered across her face as she waved to the audience. But those who knew her well could already sense something different in her demeanor. Her eyes held a glint that suggested tonight wouldn't be the typical feel-good celebrity chat that audiences had come to expect. She had clearly done her homework, and not the kind that leads to softball questions about upcoming tour dates and favorite songs. Ladies and gentlemen, Jenna announced to the studio audience, her voice carrying that artificial enthusiasm that has become her trademark. Please welcome the one and only Blake Shelton. The crowd erupted as Blake emerged from behind the curtain, his signature cowboy hat slightly tilted, flashing that genuine smile that has charmed fans for decades. He waved to the audience, clearly in good spirits, completely unaware of what was about to unfold. As Blake settled into the guest chair, adjusting his jacket and exchanging pleasantries with Jenna, the atmosphere seemed cordial enough. The first few minutes proceeded exactly as expected. Light banter about his flight, compliments about his recent performances, and the usual back and forth that fills the opening moments of any celebrity interview. Blake appeared relaxed, even joking with the audience about his latest fishing expedition and how he'd rather be on a lake than in a television studio. So, Blake, Jenna began, leaning forward slightly in her chair, let's talk about this amazing comeback you've been having. Your new album is climbing the charts. You're back in the spotlight, and fans are loving this return to your authentic country sound. Blake nodded, clearly pleased with the positive direction the conversation was taking. He launched into a heartfelt explanation about rediscovering his musical roots and how important it was for him to get back to the honest storytelling that had made him famous in the first place. But then, something shifted. Those who have studied Jenna's interviewing style know the signs: the slight pause, the way her smile doesn't quite reach her eyes, the subtle change in her posture that signals she's about to pounce. You know, Blake, she continued, her tone becoming noticeably sharper, it's interesting that you mention authenticity. Because there are some people who might question just how authentic this whole comeback narrative really is. Blake's expression changed almost imperceptibly. The easy smile remained, but his eyes narrowed slightly as he tried to gauge where this was heading. I'm not sure I follow you, Jenna, he replied carefully, his Oklahoma drawl becoming more pronounced as it always did when he felt defensive. Jenna leaned back in her chair, clearly savoring the moment. Well, let's be honest here. This isn't really your first comeback, is it? I mean, there was that period a few years ago when your career hit some pretty significant bumps. Radio stations weren't playing your music. Album sales were disappointing. And there were rumors about your personal life affecting your professional relationships. Some might say this whole return to authenticity thing is just clever marketing to rehabilitate an image that had taken some serious hits. The tension in the studio became palpable. Audience members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, sensing that this had taken an unexpected turn. Blake's publicist, sitting just off camera, was frantically scribbling notes and making urgent hand gestures to the production team, clearly trying to signal that this line of questioning was not what had been agreed upon in the pre-interview discussions. Blake maintained his composure, but his knuckles were now white as he gripped the arms of his chair. "Jenna, I think you might be misinformed about a few things," he said, his voice steady but with an edge that hadn't been there moments before. "Every artist goes through ups and downs. That's the nature of this business. But to suggest that my music isn't authentic, or that my career struggles were somehow my fault personally, that's crossing a line." "Am I crossing a line?" Jenna shot back, her voice rising slightly. "Or am I just asking the questions that other interviewers are too polite to ask? Because let's face it, Blake, there are stories out there. Stories about behavior on set, about conflicts with other artists, about a pattern of difficulty that goes way beyond normal career fluctuations. And now, conveniently, just when you need it most, you've found religion about getting back to your roots?" The audience was now completely silent, the jovial atmosphere of moments before replaced by an uncomfortable tension that seemed to fill every corner of the studio. Blake's jaw tightened, and for a moment it looked like he might stand up and walk away right then and there. Instead, he took a deep breath and leaned forward, matching Jenna's aggressive posture. "You know what, Jenna?" Blake said, his voice now carrying a dangerous edge. "I came here thinking we were going to have a conversation about music and maybe give your viewers something positive to talk about. But it seems like you had a different agenda from the moment I walked out here. So why don't you just cut to the chase and tell me what this is really about?" Jenna's smile widened, but it was predatory now, not welcoming. "What this is about, Blake, is honesty. Something the entertainment industry could use a lot more of. And honestly, I think your fans deserve to know the real story behind this comeback before they invest their hard-earned money in concert tickets and albums." The camera operators were having a field day, alternating between close-ups of Blake's increasingly angry expression and Jenna's triumphant smirk. This was exactly the kind of television moment that would generate clips, headlines, and social media buzz for weeks. But as the tension continued to build, it became clear that neither Blake nor Jenna was prepared to back down, and what had started as an uncomfortable exchange was rapidly escalating into something much more serious. Blake sat back in his chair, a dangerous calm settling over his features. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet but filled with barely contained fury. "You want honesty, Jenna? Here's some honesty for you. You've been sitting there for the past 10 minutes trying to tear down everything I've worked for. Based on what? Gossip? Rumors? Industry chatter from people who weren't even in the room when whatever supposedly happened? The confrontation was reaching a critical point, and everyone in the studio could feel it. The air was thick with hostility as Blake's eyes locked onto Jenna's, neither one willing to give an inch. What happened next would forever change how audiences viewed both the country music legend and the talk show host who thought she could break him. Jenna wasn't finished. In fact, she was just getting started. "You talk about rumors and gossip, Blake, but let's talk about facts. Let's talk about the very real complaints that came from your own record label about missed studio sessions, about producers who refused to work with you again, about the string of collaborations that fell through because, and I quote from an industry insider, Blake became impossible to work with." Blake's face flushed red, the calm facade finally beginning to crack. "Industry insider?" he repeated, his voice dripping with disgust. "You mean some coward who won't put their name behind their accusations? That's your idea of journalism, Jenna? Anonymous sources spreading poison?" "Anonymous sources are how real stories get told in Hollywood, Blake, and you know it," Jenna fired back, clearly relishing every moment of Blake's discomfort. "People are afraid to speak on the record because they know there will be consequences, but the truth has a way of coming out eventually, doesn't it?" The studio audience was now completely captivated by the train wreck unfolding before them. Some were recording on their phones despite the no-recording policy, while others simply stared in shocked silence. This was not the wholesome afternoon entertainment they had signed up for, but nobody could look away from the carnage. Blake stood up abruptly from his chair, towering over Jenna, who remained seated, her expression one of barely concealed satisfaction. "You want to know what the truth is, Jenna? The truth is that I've been in this business for over 2 decades, and I've seen people like you come and go. People who think that tearing others down makes good television. people who hide behind their microphones and think that gives them the right to destroy careers and reputations. Sit down, Blake, Jenna commanded, her voice sharp and authoritative. We're not done here. Oh, we're done, Blake shot back. But he remained standing, his hands clenched at his sides. We were done the moment you decided to ambush me instead of having an actual conversation. But since you want to air dirty laundry on television, let's talk about your track record, shall we? The color drained from Jenna's face. This was not how the script was supposed to go. She was supposed to be in control, asking the hard questions while Blake squirmed in the hot seat. But now the tables were turning, and she could feel the power dynamic shifting in ways she hadn't anticipated. Let's talk about how many guests have walked off your show in the past year alone, Blake continued, his voice growing stronger and more confident with each word. Let's talk about the complaints to the network, about your interviewing tactics. Let's talk about how your ratings have been sliding, because people are getting tired of watching you tear down anyone who sits in that chair across from you. Jenna's producer was now frantically signaling from behind the cameras, making cutting motions across his throat, but both Jenna and Blake were too locked in their battle to pay attention to anyone else. This had become personal, and there was no going back now. You think you're some kind of crusading journalist, Blake said, beginning to pace back and forth in front of Jenna's desk. But what you really are is a bully with a television show. You invite people on here under false pretenses, pretend you're going to have a friendly chat, and then you attack them when they can't defend themselves properly because they're guests in your house. This is my show, Blake, Jenna snapped, finally standing up to match his energy. My house, my rules. And if you can't handle tough questions, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews at all. Tough questions? Blake laughed, but there was no humor in it. Is that what you call character assassination based on unnamed sources and industry gossip? Real tough questions would be about my music, about my creative process, about the actual substance of what I do. But you're not interested in that, are you? You're interested in cheap shots and gotcha moments. The confrontation had now escalated to the point where both host and guest were standing, facing off across the small coffee table that separated them. The camera operators were capturing every angle, every facial expression, every gesture that would later be dissected frame by frame across social media platforms and entertainment news shows. You want to know what's cheap, Blake? Jenna's voice was now raised to match his, all pretense of professional composure abandoned. What's cheap is coming on here and playing the victim when there are legitimate questions about your behavior and your career. What's cheap is expecting everyone to just accept your comeback story without asking any hard questions about what led to your downfall in the first place. My downfall? Blake's voice cracked with incredulous anger. Lady, I've sold millions of albums. I've had #1 hits spanning 3 decades, and I've built a career that most artists can only dream of. If that's your definition of failure, then I'd hate to see what you consider success. Success is honesty, Blake. Success is accountability. Success is owning up to your mistakes instead of rewriting history to make yourself look better. Jenna was now pointing her finger directly at him, her face flushed with the adrenaline of battle. And what we're seeing right now, this anger, this defensiveness, this inability to handle legitimate criticism, this is exactly what people have been talking about behind closed doors. Blake took a step closer to Jenna's desk, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried more menace than his previous shouting. You want to see what people talk about behind closed doors, Jenna? Let's talk about what people in this industry really think about you. Let's talk about how agents warn their clients before they book them on your show. Let's talk about how other hosts in this building avoid you in the hallways because they're embarrassed to be associated with what you call journalism. The audience gasped audibly at this revelation. Blake had crossed a line now, moving from defending himself to actively attacking his host on her own show, in front of her own audience. But he was clearly past the point of caring about consequences or professional courtesy. You're out of line, Jenna said, but her voice wavered slightly, betraying the first crack in her confidence since the interview began. I'm out of line? Blake exploded. I'm out of line? You invite me here under false pretenses. You attack my character. You spread rumors and innuendo about my career and my personal life, and I'm the one who's out of line for defending myself?" The studio had fallen completely silent, except for the sound of the two combatants' heavy breathing and the quiet whir of the cameras that continued rolling, capturing every moment of this unprecedented meltdown. Even the production crew seemed frozen, unsure whether to intervene or let this play out to its inevitable conclusion. Jenna tried to regain control of the situation, but it was clear that she had pushed Blake beyond the point of no return. "Blake, I think we need to take a commercial break and—" "No," Blake cut her off, his voice firm and final. "No commercial break, no reset, no chance for you to regroup and figure out how to spin this. We're going to finish this right here, right now, in front of everyone, since that's apparently how you like to do business." The tension in the room was now so thick, it was almost suffocating, and everyone present knew they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. What happened next would not only end this disastrous interview, but would fundamentally change both careers forever, creating a moment that would be replayed, analyzed, and remembered as one of television's most explosive confrontations. Blake looked directly into the camera, bypassing Jenna entirely as he addressed the audience at home. "You know what, folks? I want you all to see exactly what kind of person your host really is. This whole thing was planned from the beginning. She never intended to have a real conversation about music or my career. This was always meant to be an ambush, a character assassination disguised as an interview." Jenna's face contorted with rage at being ignored on her own show. "Don't you dare turn your back on me, Blake Shelton. This is my show, and you'll answer my questions or you'll get out." Blake spun around to face her, his eyes blazing with a fury that made several audience members visibly flinch. "Get out? Oh, trust me, I'm getting out. But not before I tell everyone exactly what kind of operation you're running here. You want to talk about authenticity? Let's talk about how authentic it is to promise guests one type of interview and then deliver something completely different. Let's talk about how authentic it is to use anonymous sources and industry gossip to destroy people's reputations. Those sources are legitimate, and you know it," Jenna shot back, but her voice lacked the conviction it had carried earlier. Blake's counterattack had clearly rattled her more than she wanted to admit. "Legitimate?" Blake's laugh was bitter and harsh. "You want to know what's legitimate? The fact that 3 different guests have filed complaints with the network about your tactics this year alone. The fact that your own production staff have been looking for other jobs because they're tired of being associated with this kind of trash television. The fact that your ratings are in freefall because people are sick of watching you destroy careers for entertainment." The audience was now murmuring among themselves, some nodding in agreement with Blake's words, while others looked shocked at the revelations being aired on live television. This had gone far beyond a simple celebrity interview gone wrong. This was a complete breakdown of professional decorum that was exposing the ugly underbelly of daytime television. Jenna's producer was now frantically trying to get the attention of the director, making desperate hand signals to cut to commercial. But the director seemed transfixed by the drama unfolding before the cameras. This was the kind of raw, unfiltered television that money couldn't buy, and everyone in the control room knew they were witnessing something unprecedented. "You think you can come on my show and attack me?" Jenna's voice was shrill now, all pretense of professional composure completely abandoned. "You think you can stand there and lie about my ratings, about my reputation, about my staff?" "I'm not lying about anything, and we both know it," Blake replied, his voice steady and controlled again, which somehow made his words even more devastating. "The difference between us, Jenna, is that I'm willing to put my name behind what I say. I'm not hiding behind anonymous sources or industry insiders. I'm looking you in the eye and telling you exactly what I think of you and your show." Blake then did something that no guest had ever done before on Jenna's show. He walked over to her desk and leaned across it, bringing his face close to hers as he spoke in a voice that was barely above a whisper, but carried clearly through the studio microphones. "You made a big mistake today, Jenna. You thought you could bully me like you've bullied all your other guests. You thought I would just sit there and take it because I needed the publicity for my album. But here's what you didn't count on. I don't need you. I don't need your show. and I sure as hell don't need to put up with your amateur hour character assassination attempts." Jenna tried to respond, but Blake held up his hand to silence her. "I'm not finished. You want to know what the real story is here? The real story is that you've been so desperate to create viral moments and controversial clips that you've forgotten what actual journalism looks like. You've turned your show into a gladiator arena, where you throw celebrities to the lions for the entertainment of people who have nothing better to do with their afternoons." The country music star straightened up and looked around the studio, taking in the shocked faces of the audience, the frozen production crew, and the cameras that were still rolling. "And you know what the saddest part is? You had a chance to do something meaningful here. You could have asked me about my music, about my songwriting process, about the artists who influenced me, about what it's like to work with the next generation of country stars. You could have given your audience something positive, something inspiring, something that might have made their day a little brighter." Blake shook his head in disgust as he continued, "But instead, you chose to wallow in negativity and gossip. You chose to try to tear down someone who came here in good faith, thinking he was going to have a pleasant conversation about his passion. That says everything anyone needs to know about who you really are as a person and as a professional." Jenna finally found her voice again, but it came out as a desperate shriek. "Security! Get security in here right now! I want him removed from my set immediately!" Blake laughed, a genuine laugh this time, as he reached up and removed his microphone pack, tossing it onto Jenna's desk with a satisfying thud. "Save yourself the trouble, Jenna. I'm done here, but before I go, I want everyone in this audience and everyone watching at home to remember this moment. Remember what you saw here today. Remember how your host treats people who come on her show in good faith. Remember how she conducts herself when someone finally stands up to her bullying tactics." As Blake began walking toward the exit, Jenna made one final desperate attempt to regain control of the situation. "You can't just walk out on me. I'm not finished with you yet." Blake stopped at the edge of the stage and turned back to face her one last time. "But I'm finished with you, Jenna. And after today, I have a feeling a lot of other people are going to be finished with you too." The audience erupted into a mixture of applause and shocked gasps as Blake Shelton walked off the set, leaving Jenna Bush standing alone behind her desk, her face flushed with embarrassment and rage. The cameras continued rolling for several more seconds, capturing her stunned expression as she realized the magnitude of what had just happened. For the first time in her career, Jenna was completely speechless. She looked around the studio desperately, searching for something to say, some way to salvage the situation, but the damage was already done. The most explosive confrontation in daytime television history had just concluded with her guest not only walking out, but completely destroying her reputation in the process. The director finally came to his senses and called for a commercial break, but it was too late. The damage was done, the moment was captured, and within minutes, clips of the confrontation would be spreading across every social media platform and entertainment news outlet in the country. As the studio lights dimmed and the audience began filing out in hushed, excited whispers, Jenna Bush was left standing alone on her set, the wreckage of her career scattered around her like debris from an explosion. She had finally pushed too far, picked on the wrong guest, and learned the hard way that not everyone in Hollywood was willing to be a victim of her aggressive interviewing style. Blake Shelton, meanwhile, walked out of that studio with his head held high, his integrity intact, and his reputation not only unscathed, but actually enhanced by his refusal to be bullied on national television. He had shown the world what it looked like when someone finally stood up to the kind of toxic behavior that had become all too common in entertainment media. The confrontation was over, but its impact would be felt for years to come, fundamentally changing how both the industry and audiences viewed the relationship between hosts and guests, and proving once and for all that sometimes the only way to deal with a bully is to stand up and fight back.